Um, Welcome those of you who are here to a webcast with LPM and NetDocuments. I'm Rupert Collins-White. I am from LPM magazine, LPM brand. I co-founded sort of LPM back in 2012, and then we launched LPM magazine in 2014. So we've been going an awfully long time, and we've been mapping the SME legal market since then. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's come up over the years and is sort of an incredibly important thing for SME firms. When we say SME firms, LPM thinks of SME firms as being something between 5 to 10 people and 250 people. So it's a wide bracket, but there's a lot going on in there as it is. We've got some great people today to talk through these big issues about document management. Why are we here? Mainly this is around why do smaller firms need to think about document management? It's often a problem that you don't really know exists, let alone why you should solve it. But in an increasingly digitalized world where all legal services, or nearly all of them, are going to be delivered in some manner digitally, and there's an awful lot of pressures on becoming a more digitally capable business, it's never more important. So well, I've got two great people with me today. I have Michael Hill, who is an expert from NetDocuments. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Or Mike, if you will be for this one. And Andrew Wingfield from Farringford. Hello, Andrew.
Hi. Hi.
So we're going to, I don't want to introduce both of you. So I'd just like you to take a couple of seconds to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and the site. And for you, Andrew, like just really briefly describe the law firm where you work, so that our audience can understand the kind of the challenge base.
Sure.
Let's start with you, Andrew.
Yeah. So Farringford Legal is a small, let's call it a new model virtual firm. We're all lawyers in, let's say, our third stage of career, but we got together about three and a half years ago to make a firm that's dedicated to looking after the SME market. So our services around the corporate, commercial, tax, employment, and data protection, supplying to startup or growth clients.
Excellent, thank you. Michael, tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, I began my career in legal technology approaching 20 years ago, specifically focused on the needs of small law firms, North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and have since kind of moved into a variety of different pieces of the tech stack, including financial and practice management. But currently, I am at NetDocuments, and I would say my role is to sort of help folks understand. I think basic questions like what is the evolving role of legal document management in firms and departments of all sizes, but over the past couple of years, more particularly, what is the most responsible way to leverage automation, artificial intelligence, kind of new technology to drive greater success, greater efficiency, productivity, profitability, the kind of whatever the key metrics of success are for the given firm or organization.
Okay, thank you. So that's kind of setting the scene of who we've got here to talk to us. And I'm going to sort of do a quick run through of like, why should we be having this conversation at the moment? And that is that document management solutions are something that the large law have been using for donkey's years in various guises, and it's something that lots of smaller firms use, but it's also something that lots of smaller firms don't use, and use a panoply of other kind of systems that fill in what it is that document management kind of does. Or worse, they are not using anything to kind of manage the elements of what document management systems use. And it would be certainly, I think, fair to say that in the past, that would be something that you get away with a lot more easily than you can now. And I think we're going to dig into, hopefully, a little bit about why you really should be thinking about some of the compliance and regulatory and security elements that can solve, let alone the element of sort of like of how you can do work better, more efficiently and more productively. So for smaller firms, it's not easy to understand sometimes why adopting something like document management is something you should consider doing, because the problem isn't something that's always terribly apparent. And that goes in the same way for lots of technology areas of law firms. If a law firm's doing reasonably well, if it's generating good profitability, if the business is delivering great service to clients, then ultimately everything's fine. But unfortunately, that's not really thinking about this in a more sort of progressive, sort of future-looking kind of way. So I am going to what we're going to do today, rather, we're going to have a chat with Andrew and get an understanding about sort of where Farringford came from, how it identified why it needed to do something with document management, had moved away from the way it was working before, how it kind of got there into that one, and also what you could see, what the problems you saw, and why you need to solve them, and also hopefully let's get into a little bit of like what do you see the future benefits are, and then we're going to sort of bring in Mike on that one, and he's going to talk to us about where some of those future roadmap benefits are, like what we don't want to think about smaller firms imagining that goal well down the road. That's not very helpful for small business, to be honest with you. They want to know, where are my near-term wins, where are the near-term successes these are going to bring me, the challenges that it's going to help me solve, but also where does that lead me to down the yellow brick road of document management. So Andrew, let's go over to you. Walk me through the kind of identification of the problems that led you to thinking about DM rather than technology stuff. What were the kind of problems and how did they come up? I think that's what's really important. How did you and the firm recognize them?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So as I mentioned, we're a startup, and virtual. So the whole premise of the firm was to have people not working in the same location, if you like. And that's fine when you're small in number and you're closely knit. But once you start to separate over geography and your numbers grow, you get back into the realization that you can't manage that organization without some kind of integrity and some kind of system that helps guide people to do the right thing, and also allows people to manage a virtual situation as well. So that's about visibility and transparency. It's also about coordinating and organizing and curating information and know-how in a big picture sense. So the problems for us became size and growth. The desire to grow further. We are a growth firm that supports growth businesses. So we're kind of talking the talk, walking the walk. We're stated as being technologically driven, and that's because new law is often said to be technologically driven, but also because many of our clients are themselves technology companies. So our investment in, or our focus on, technology for ourselves became quite important, because we're reflecting some values and standards of clients in that. And it became a little bit disingenuous to be talking about AI and talking about technology when you weren't actually following that route. So we had growth, we had the nature of being virtual. We have the compliance shadow. We're not a regulated firm, but we seek to do everything according to SRA regulations. So there's all of the compliance, and in compliance, there's the potential fear of audit, the need and reason to actually open your books or provide information in a structured format according to demands on a fairly short time frame. We're also heavily invested in providing both legal advice and data protection services. So data protection is a big part of our business and a big part of the needs that we serve. And again, you need real integrity in terms of your data curation, your protection, visibility, and transparency, in order to know that you're doing the right thing, and certainly help you and assist you in knowing doing the right thing. We were using SharePoint, which frankly is a bit loosey-goosey, in that its high flexibility may lead to all kinds of outcomes, and therefore need a lot of control if you're trying to pattern behavior or trying to pattern data storage, or you're trying to conduct some kind of audit. And in that environment, and this is not a criticism of SharePoint at all, in that environment, we had a pretty near critical, near miss, shall we say, with a potential data destruction or data breach, depending on how you look at it. And that was a little wake-up call. So there was the big picture things I've identified, and then the story of little things just gathered and gathered. And you know what it's like in life, all of a sudden you realize it's time to do something. That was kind of the light bulb moment. And from the time that we thought, you know, how does this matter? Yes, it does. What are we going to do? It became pretty straightforward and pretty easy actually to select and implement, which is amazing. So I was appointed back in October. I think by January, early January, we'd gone from being a SharePoint environment into being a NetDocs environment. And I wouldn't say it was necessarily easy, but it was all highly achievable, as it were. It was an easy route map to follow. So that was it. I think how we came here was the realization that we needed to be up to the mark. There's also future proofing for us. We've got growth strategy. We couldn't sustain or hope to sustain any form of scalability through the platform that we had. And so our search for a solution was about something we could control and manage, if you like, something we could configure to our needs, but also something we could use in a scalable fashion over growth. Make one selection for a document management system and stick with it throughout all of our growth and scaling plans.
Could you, I know this might not be very easy to do, but do you think you could name, obviously considering the idea that this might be internal data, what was the straw that broke the camel's back though? Well, because what could you describe it? Because in a sense, did the firm at large see this problem, or was it more you and a few others, or just you saying, look, this is because a lot of challenges, a lot of sort of gaps in law firms and any business are kind of covered up by some people because they're fixing stuff, right? And I'm just wondering what was the moment when even the people who are kind of fixing stuff up go, look, I just can't. There's only so much lipstick I could put on this. I can't.
Yeah.
What happened? What made it really came to a head?
Yeah, I can do that, but just to maybe fill a gap. So in terms of what I do and what I'm here to care about. So I'm both the transactional lawyer in the M&A space, and the head of innovation and operations. So I look after all of the operational capability, performance, and op risk as well. Actually, it's a good question in a sense because there's kind of a cinematic answer to it in that one day I opened my inbox, I think it was late on a Friday night, and there were about 300 emails referring to documents and including the word deletion. And it had just been, one of those events that people involved necessarily weren't aware they were doing. They were doing the best thing and the right thing in their belief, but the system hacked it into something completely different, and it made it look like we'd lost just a pile of data through an inadvertent document destruction. And I say it was cinematic because I and everyone else in the firm got these emails saying, oh, by the way, that document's gone now. Now, of course, we have backup and we're prepared for all of that, but we realized that there was a combination of what the system does, your trust and belief in the system, your capability with the system, and its flexibility combining into an easy error, which you would not be aware you were necessarily doing at the time. And that for me is a kind of a problem. We needed safety catches, security locks, and other things to know that we could prevent those things in the future. So that was pretty graphic. We were all pretty much of a mind we were going to change anyway. It was extraordinarily good timing. In the sense that it gave that example of why, and also an example of what we were avoiding when it came to speccing and our statement of needs.
There's the sort of the essence. There's moments of change actually nearly always driven by something like that, aren't they? That you need to have kind of some internal kind of acceptance, but there needs to be a reason to push the door open on any kind of change. It's normally those things. I just was curious whether or not, obviously, there was some form of management of the documents in the business going on. It wasn't a zero. It wasn't a zero platform. One of the issues there, it feels like what the identification of need is that, in a sense, this is something that has to be set up and managed internally by the firm. You've got to kind of create you're basically reinventing the wheel that DM
Yes.
systems have already fixed. That's the
Yes.
issue, isn't it? That you're using,
Yes.
sort of normal business systems, and you're having to try to, in a sense, do what already exists. Some firms don't really know that that does exist, though. Isn't that the case? That you obviously did, but in a sense, some firms don't even realise that there is an pre-formed kind of system that can deliver these outcomes. How did you know? When you said you were thinking about doing it, where were you? How did you arrive at that idea that you guys were already thinking of changing up, as it were?
Yeah.
Where did that
Yeah.
conversation come from?
Well, one piece of it is maybe peculiar to me in that my past experience is heavily in the in-house environment in global organizations where, I had a global remit and I needed to know what was going on in 1,500 contracts at any instant anywhere in the world. So I understood pretty well from that experience how the identification of detail and the localization of fact and data was really, really important. So I already had the idea of the structure for how we better organize data around a structure. So that's one thing.
Hmm.
And then the other thing is that it's highly forgivable to bootstrap a firm off MS 365. Um, and it's very easy to forget some of the discipline that you may have, received or been given or shown in various parts of your training as a lawyer around the construct of file and information and everything else, and how important that is. And then get into practice, and priorities change. In practice, priorities change as you go up the ladder. It's about client service. It's not necessarily about document hygiene. And so as I think people go up the scale, the world changes in terms of what's available in technology, and solutions like NetDocuments become optimized for legal. It's not the only one, but the simple fact that a DMS can stand alone under the banner of we are optimized for legal, I think says everything, which is that it's a very specific thing to run documents, manage documents, and maintain documents for the legal world. That's because of the legal world and because of the nature of lawyers. So when we went looking for DMS, even I wasn't thinking, oh, we must find a law-specific DMS. It was, we must find a good DMS, and we just happened to chance on law-specific DMS. So a happy accident, if you like. But and I think it goes to your point, Rupert, which I really
Hmm.
wasn't of the mindset of, oh, there's legal specific DMS. Okay, but once you find it and realize, actually, no, we are a funny bunch. We've got our own peculiarities, lawyers, as a rule.
Hmm.
We have these habits. We do understand very important things very well. It may not be our daily focus about how it works in a technological sense, but we're very responsive, or certainly I am, to the idea of legal optimized DMS.
I just want to let's get on to the next bit of that, which is that the idea of, you said it was not easy, but it was achievable in that terms of the transition. So
Mm.
what was the kind of, if your firm's about, I think it's 25 people, isn't it? 25 head count
Yes.
overall.
Yeah.
What's the kind of time scale from when you said, right, okay, we're going to start, with that? What was the time scale from when you said, okay, we're going to do this, we've picked we've picked
Right.
NetDocuments to do
Yeah.
this with,
Yes.
until you turned off what you were doing? You didn't really do that. You kind of just transitioned in a sense. How
Yeah.
long did it take, and if you can name like the top three things that if I was in a firm like yours, that I want to go, oh, I should pay it. These are the things I wish I'd known.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think we're extraordinarily lucky because we had the momentum of what was behind us, and
Hmm.
again, to put it in context, in terms of timing, we were focusing on an automation project at the time that the focus for DMS came up. So we switched horses completely and we reprioritized. So it was kind of a cold start. But if my memory serves me, we're talking sort of mid-late October kind of start line, and we went live early January. Yeah. So in that time, we'd done the equivalent of, or we'd bootstrapped together the equivalent of a search and select, a
Hmm.
search and select, um, in parallel, figure out what your real statement of needs which is helped by searching and selecting, because we get to talk to people and do the demos, and you start to see what's out there, you get educated, and then you start to prioritize, you know, what it is you care about and how you identify what you need. And then you kind of go into final selection, budget, and we were in final selection, chosen NetDocuments as our solution, and just as importantly, our implementation partner for that in November, and project managed that through November, kind of stopped working on it you know, over the Christmas period, and then January went live. And the go live is you stop work on Friday night, you go home for the weekend, and in the morning your brand new DMS is, in our case, fully functional with no service disruption whatsoever. So in summary, 2 months. We don't have a team here for implementation. There's myself and the practice manager. We were basically it for devising. We've got an outsourced CTO who was able to help with the switches, kind of flicking the switches and some of the diagrams and connection points. We chose our implementation partner, who was absolutely brilliant, because they're experienced NetDocuments implementation partners. They told us what to do, how to run the project, and we worked through the really important stuff, which is, we've got this information in this structure. Will this be our structure going forward, or are we now reinventing the structure? And we did a hybrid of that. We took on the old structure of how we recognized and identified matters and documents, and we sort of incorporated it into the new, took some opportunities to make some changes. And then from that we had collateral benefit, which is the process of moving to a new document system helps you get up to speed where you should have been in the first place in terms of just managing that stuff. Yeah, all the lights go on. It gets done in a project pressure environment, and you go live and you're working in a new system, and you've probably advanced yourself more than you would in 6 months of dilly-dallying in the normal process where you're not deadline driven, if you like. So that was another collateral benefit. But yeah, limited resource and limited time. I know it wasn't easy at the time, but looking back on it, it was pretty efficient, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, to sum up where we got to now. So obviously there was a period of time when the business had to realize what it was, what the need was. You know, you mentioned the idea that, you know, smaller firms, even if they're not necessarily regulated in one way, there's still, you know, there's the pressure of audit. You may need to worry about the idea of being able to produce. And as obviously we growth, I mean, unless you're a firm that's not interested in growing at all, you obviously are going to look into the future and say, well, you know, at some point, and if I get audited, I'm going to have to, you know, I need to be able to say that I'm doing the right things. I love the idea, the point you made about the idea that if you're advising on data protection and what have you, then you have to, as the phrase goes famously, eat your own dog food. So you've really got to kind of, you know, it'd be terrible to not be able to do that. And it would be reputationally even worse, wouldn't it? If you do that to have a problem, it's even worse than if you didn't advise on that and had a problem, because, you know, that strikes to your own competence and what you're going to be advising. I love the idea that there's a coalescence of things that all came together to kind of, you know, over time, like any decision in any human system, is that after a while you go, look, the weight of these different things comes together until you think, well, the pressure of change becomes important. I sort of, it's really interesting that we arrive at this point where relatively short amount of time by comparison to large firms. I think one of the really interesting things about stuff to do with DM, even though it's, you know, it's very well known in the big law circles, that in a sense, implementing anything that is this deeply connected to the firm, right? You mentioned, in a sense, you referenced this very there in terms of it's going through this kind of transition tends to make you look at things like, you know, data structure, IA, things like taxonomies and stuff, and it forces you, unlike anything else, to get that a bit more right than it might have been before. And so, but for 25 people, the implementation is so much more significantly less challenging than if you're trying to do it for 250 or 2,500. And so actually, I just think that sometimes, you know, things like DM, which has been around a while, so it kind of is an embedded thing in the system in the market, that it seems like it's one of those things that for small firms is really, really difficult to do. It's like this is a monstrously difficult thing to do. But actually, it's kind of because it's a small number of people, that outcome is more achievable than you think, and it's like the benefits could be quite outsized compared to the effort. Is that how you feel, that where you've got to now? Do you feel like, wow, these benefits, you get the same kind of benefits as big law stuff, but the implementation was nowhere near as difficult? See what I mean?
I think we definitely are. In fact, it's long been a theory of mine that in the modern technology environment, the small firm has an advantage. The small group of people has the advantage in technology because of the pace of change, potential pace of change. As long as you have good advice, good tools, good advice in terms of external parties and how to implement, and you have people motivated enough to care internally, which we certainly do, then you can really, as we do, you make a leap and a bound. Yes, you can. And would it be the same for me in, global, thousands of people? In a way, Rupert, I'll disagree with you slightly. There's something about the generic nature of what you have to do from a small and a large project. There's a lot in common. And there's the great thing about the DMS is at the end of the day, it does something really simple. It's just a bookshelf, if you like. Yeah, it's just a thing you put stuff on, but in a technology way. Everyone's doing that. So I don't think the size necessarily brings more complexity, which is one thing to remember if people are struggling with, well, we're bigger and that's a big project. I don't think it makes the project necessarily bigger because the generics are all the same. I think there's just the masterminding is quite important, the planning and the communication is really important, and also doing whatever you need to work out how much diversity there is in your organization in terms of how people do what. I think that could be the issue with size.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was referencing in terms of
Yeah.
you've got a much larger firm, you've got more difference.
Yes.
And difference can be its own, it's obviously its own benefit, but
Yes.
it can be its own problem there.
Yeah.
We have a question from the floor, actually, from Joe Hughes, who said, who was your implementation partner and how did you choose them?
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. If I can remember. There's a guy called Fraser Mayfield. Fraser Mayfield was recommended by NetDocuments. I don't remember the name of his firm right now on the spot, but I'm sure someone can put it on the chat from my team.
We will. We know Fraser, so
You know
I'm
Fraser,
sure
yeah.
someone can punch him.
Yeah.
Matters Cloud, apparently.
Yes. And here's something, maybe just throw it in now, Rupert, now that question has come up, because we're not there yet. But when you look at the cost of this project, there are two clear costs. One is implementation itself, that's internal and an external partner, and the cost of the tool. And one thing NetDocs has got right, we've discovered through our research, one thing NetDocs got right was to curate their own partner community in the implementation space, such that you had people who knew what they were doing, but were also costing at realistic levels, taking into consideration the actual project and the actual firm. In our case, small firm, not massive budget. We're not looking for a massive budget implementation. We're looking for something skinny, and that just didn't happen by accident. I think that was part of the combinatory power of NetDocuments plus its partner community. So another important thing for people to look out for, keeping that implementation cost in line.
That's great stuff. Great stuff. Thank you. One thing I'll do before I'm going to move on to Mike, who's been very patient. Thank you, Mike. Because when we were trying to talk about what the most important elements of this were before the event, the idea of the compliance and security came really to the fore there. And we do a lot of stuff for SME law firms, and nearly all of them, hold their head in their hands, quite frankly, over the compliance burden that's now being placed upon them by various regulatory authorities and by the market. So could you give me the rundown on, like, when you said, now you've moved into this sort of brave new world, what kind of compliance benefits or sort of compliance outcomes, for example, can you say, look, I can describe these clearly. These are the compliance outcomes that, so as a smaller firm, it's really helping us to kind of do stuff that's going to maybe making it easier or saving you a bit less money on doing it, or just making it more reliable or more consistent?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think maybe two things in compliance. So compliance generally, in my view, is a behavioral thing. There are things to do the right way. The tool itself, because you configure or you have some input into how it's configured and how it's used, you're actually helping habituation in the compliance format. There's any certain way to do things, and it's the right way. And if you don't do it the right way, we know you've done it the wrong way because we've got visibility in the tool and the system. So that's the tool as a tool for compliance, if you like, and compliance culture, which is quite important. And then I can give you some specific case studies. So we've been overhauling how we do AML, as everyone is from time to time, and I think the burden gets bigger, or the clarity on what it is you need to do grows. And if you can look at it two ways round, you've got ongoing, say, risk assessment to do. You've got the potential ongoing for actually serving up responses to, do you have this, do you not have that, and how many times have you done this? And DMS will help you structure that data and information for retrieval, and also help pattern where you put that information. And then there is, okay, what do we put in different risk categories, which is usually about matter type or client type. And again, if your DMS is able to reflect that structure in the taxonomy, you can focus on either the workflows that hang off your DMS, or in very simple terms, you're already patterning the data that you need to retrieve and answer those questions, or just monitor in a BMI sense, business management information. What have we got? What's arisen this week? So AML is one thing. As I say, we're not SRA regulated, but we seek to follow all of their compliance direction. And again, it's all about data and/or retrieval. And then there's, as we said, the pure data protection. Data protection is a form of compliance in the modern world, for sure. And what have we done, and how have we configured things for us? And then how have we taken that knowledge and used it for clients about how they should actually. So compliance, when you look at it, is sort of internal, external. It's not just a burden; it's actually an opportunity as well. And I guess in data protection, we turned it into an opportunity.
That's great, thank you. We've got another question actually, but I don't sound surprised, but it's because it's relatively fizzy. This one, it's what kind of integration, if any, have you done between the NetDocuments DMS and your other core systems, so case management, accounts, straight PMS? Have you got anything going on there already, or is there an intention to?
We haven't at the moment. There's definitely intention. So knowing that we're a relatively small firm but ambitious, we've climbed this mountain, with the other side of the NetDocuments mountain, if you like. And looking back on it, that was the right thing to do. Documents is very centric to the law firm structure, and very centric to how you build on ideas of what to do next. Because all systems really work off repository, or all AI works off repository, works off data. So no, we are not there yet. We're now doing the full, it sounds a bit cliche, but the full root and branch about, okay, between the tactical needs and the strategic arc, we've now started that review. So it's like we've got breathing space to stop and think, okay, we're kind of safe here, 1 foot on the ground. Next, we've really got to think about what comes next. That is what comes next. Thinking about what comes next, and doing the strategy, and we've got space to do that. And the thing about the modern world, of course, is there's so much to choose from. We use Clio in the practice management. We've looked at whether we would or could or should and how, and we're not 100% convinced. And don't take that as a negative. again, there's always the difference between is it going to do what I want it to do, and then actually making choices about all the million things you could do. So Clio is not short of solutions. It's just whether you really want to go down that route compared to other options. Our finance system is pretty raw. We're not a high volume, if you like, in terms of numbers of billings, etc., etc. We don't have to track, relatively speaking, too much financial information. It's not a priority for us. But we've looked at we work off zero, and we've started to look at, okay, which bits of zip should we refine first, and then where are we going to get on that? And then behind that, you've got the whole kind of agentic AI approach to life, which is don't worry about APIs and integration, because the robots will do that for you. You don't necessarily have to do it in a physical structural way. You can do it in an agentic way. You can take AI and just mash your systems together and write the script for that and make them work together without an AI. But our vision and picture would be we kind of end up with one system. It may be a system of many parts, but it's one system. The core of kind of law firm architecture going forward is about orchestration. It's about selection of the right tool, the ability to select the right tool more and more rapidly and change that tool and put it in an architecture that meets kind of the zeitgeist of the time. And that's going to be, we're going to see a lot of change in the next 2 years, and maybe not so rapidly for the legal sector, but within the next 5 years, the legal sector is all going to be agentic or beyond. Yeah.
So I knew we'd arrive at AI eventually, but I'm really glad that it took us half an hour to get there, actually, because the world's full of that. Everyone knows that it's a real and fantastic future, and it's going to have a dramatic effect on the legal market.
Yeah.
But so much of this stuff, actually, it's a really intriguing thing that you're talking about in terms of the move to DM. I would say one of the future benefits is this kind of more, fundamentally you're putting stuff into a secure system, but you're also really thinking about the data structure. You've got to have a more ordered sort of approach to kind of, sort of like how the IA behind the system. And of course, that points you in an AI future. So talking about sort of technology, we're going to walk over to Mike Hill now from NetDocuments. Mike, you're not allowed to go to AI straight away, right? So to say that's we have to get there. But one of the things I wanted you to talk about was this kind of I mentioned at the beginning this idea that there's lots of smaller firms that do have the DMS. There are loads of areas of the smaller law firm market that don't. What kind of have you got any idea of whether the adoption state is in sort of UK and Ireland, and sort of this area about sort of how many smaller firms, percentage of them are using a DM of some kind? Is it still small scale?
No, I think it's a plurality. I'm not quite sure that it's unfortunately not something that there's fantastic data around, particularly as you get into the lower end of the market. But just based on sort of historical information and trending, I would say it's a substantial plurality. I think it's a bit optimistic to say, especially as you look at very small firms across the whole of the region, that it would be a majority. Another challenge, however, and one that I think is important for this conversation, is around the definition. I mean, I think the answer of how many legal entities manage documents, it's 100%. But there's the kind of conceptual gap between what is a purpose-built legal document management system designed specifically for the needs of legal users and organizations versus we manage our legal documents in a consumer-grade platform, or we use an enterprise-grade platform that is specifically designed for legal use cases, but that meets many of them kind of inherently. So I think that's probably one of the reasons there's not really high confidence data, is if you survey, do you use document management? Many people will say yes, because of course
they're managing documents.
Yes.
But to what level?
But yeah, but when you really look at purpose-built enterprise-grade legal document management, I would say plurality.
So thinking about the fact that I love that kind of comparison there, that every 100% of law firms have to manage documents in a kind of in an ordered, structured, and compliant, and secure manner. but sort of not all of them are doing it necessarily with the tools that are kind of built for that. And as we heard from Andrew earlier on, a law firm can attempt to do this, but actually the further down the road you go, the harder that gets. And you're really doing is you're just reinventing the wheel, basically,
Yeah.
by and large, unless you're spectacularly IT capable. And even then, you're probably wasting time and money. You should be doing lawyering and not doing that in the end. Talk to us about the kind of, give us the lowdown from NetDocuments perspective on what do you see the kind of, what are the near-term benefits that the SME firms going to do that maybe that's sort of like that how you would wrap it up that Andrew's probably already talked about, but also what are the other stuff that we've kind of missed out that if you're spending money on adopting such a thing, and you're spending the effort and months of transition and have you blah blah, what else, what other benefits lie in that kind of mid-term future once you've got this done and you're practicing a better way of document management? What other stuff hangs off that? Andrew kind of pointed out with the AI word, but there are other elements, aren't there?
Absolutely. And I think there's really two sort of, well, there's a million different answers, but I think there's two sort of inherent answers that come from your perspective. I mean, I think the inciting need to start looking at purpose-built enterprise-grade software solutions can very much be on the security and compliance side. But it can also very much be on the sort of efficiency, productivity sort of experience side as well. I mean, historically, for just a tiny bit of history, we have been a cloud document management system since before that was even really a thing. So, like, as legal document management was being defined, we decided that cloud was the right way to be because we understood lawyers are sometimes not in their office, and the challenges of maintaining secure access from a variety of different locations is important. So, historically, that, oh, we really need to be able to get at our work product from anywhere, was a driving sort of experience thing. Superior integrations with the productivity suite from Microsoft. Like, I don't want to manage my emails in two different platforms. How do we make sure that I can manage my emails in Outlook and that is reflected inside document management? I want to be able to collaborate within Teams in a way that seems native to Teams, but then everything just kind of shows up where it's supposed to be inside the document management system. Or I simply want to be able to draft and review documents in Microsoft Word. And yet the integration isn't just I can open a document in Word, but I can save the document there. I can share the document there. I can co-author the document there. I have access to any applications that I need there natively within Word. I think that can also be a very strong driver. So the answer is, if you're starting with we need a security platform that is bang on in terms of how it manages documents, right? And we may not have the need now, but we understand that we may eventually have the need for purpose-built security analytics, data loss prevention capabilities. Maybe someday we want to manage our own encryption keys, like going all the way to the sort of far end of that security and compliance stack. Then the what do you then discover is a great benefit happens on the, oh, wow, this is, there's only 12 vendors in the world who have this type of integration with Microsoft 365. And suddenly I can use my Outlook folders as a way of managing all of my emails, and they sync behind the scenes. And then there's that next step of what's coming next, and the constant evolution of what document management is and can mean. And then likewise, if you start with the experience, it's like, oh, wow, suddenly our experience, our productivity, our efficiency goes up, but we have so much greater certainty and visibility around security, and that can be a significant benefit as we grow. Or, and to be clear, when I say grow, I don't necessarily mean traditional growth. I mean, one thing I've learned, particularly in working with small and mid-sized firms, is the definition of what success looks like can be highly variable. So whether growth is in, client growth, book of business, et cetera, or whether it's changing the type of service, enhancing the type of service that's provided to existing clients, or frankly, as often happens, at least in my neck of the woods, how do I have a more livable life? how do I have the practice that I want? And sometimes that
Mm.
is very ambitious, very much about, bottom line, how do we grow revenues? How do we grow revenues faster than we grow our expenses? Or it could be, how do we grow into the type of practice that everyone really enjoys doing? And anywhere in between. So regardless what that growth looks like, I think the aha moment
Mm.
for firms is often centered around, I came here for the one side of the equation, and then I'm surprised and delighted by the fact that so many needs on the other side of the equation are answered.
Just want to get into that productivity thing for a second, actually, because I think that's kind of the down the road benefits. I think I also wanted to get to
Yeah.
was this, it's not necessarily about working harder or working faster and doing throughput, but the idea of the joined up, this idea of, down the road, even the smaller firms can benefit from, in a sense, these kind of like the more joined up workflow elements that these kind of things bring. Could you describe to us in relatively simple for poor laymen like me, that can you describe the kind of workflow process benefits that can flow from such an implementation, Mike, that go, what kind of things would I imagine being able to join up and therefore just be able to do more easily and not just consistently, because there's also that to it, but those things, what can you describe some?
Yeah. At one time, my title in a previous organization was something global legal workflow, which is very confusing. And my joke was there's no such thing because there's such great variability. So I kind of had to take a 10,000-foot view. Uh, you know, Legal workflow is highly variable, but you have to find the information, right? You then have to interpret and understand that information. You have to apply it to the task at hand. And hopefully you're doing so in a system whereby all of that work is generating data that enhances and enriches the entire, knowledge environment in which you work. So let's use that. I think one of the earliest benefits that people realize in terms of productivity is just the ease at finding the information that I'm looking for. One of the inciting kind of needs that often leads to legal document management is just the difficulty finding what you need.
Mm.
And that could be from, first shot basic kind of, I'm putting in what makes sense to me and I get the list of documents and the one I'm looking is number one. But then also the sort of advanced filtering that's required to really hone in on exactly the piece of information that you're looking for. And that is evolving. The advent of semantic and specifically hybrid semantic and lexical search. I know those are uh, complex terms, but how Google works. You can use Boolean operators, you can use logic in a search to really include, exclude terms, but most people are acculturated to, let me just ask a question and I expect to get
Mhm.
not only the answer, but also all the sources from which that answer was drawn so that I can validate them myself or continue my inquiry. So that mode of search has been one that hasn't been available in most legal systems and is on its way very, very soon. Uh, the understanding portion, I mean, there's another kind of transition there. Obviously, the quicker and more efficiently you can narrow the universe down to the most relevant and on point documents or a data set, the faster you can and then interpret that within the context of a given client or matter. Um, but really that's kind of old school now, because like any system worth its salt is going to provide a facility for being able to inquire into those documents, ask questions, get back a high confidence answer. And
Mhm.
then the application of that, whether it is, I need background or I need an understanding of certain, deal points or whatever it happens to be, the application of that information understanding to the task at hand has been the world of automation and integration for years, right?
Yeah.
Independent of generative AI. I mean, I'm a big believer that all firms, even the smallest, can hugely benefit from the appropriate degree of responsibly applied automation. and that the advent of something like generative AI really just expands the impact of automation. It's not some separate thing. It should be thought of in the context of how can we speed our ability to deliver impeccable work product and superior client value. And a lot of that is inherently going to be based on logic and rules, not just
Mm.
fancy new generative AI capabilities, but those two play very well together. So the seamless application of that information understanding to the task at hand is often about what's the stuff that people hate doing because it is repetitive and takes a very long time and is preparatory for the work that actually delivers value to the client. Or what's the stuff that is just very, very hard for people to do, but that the technology can simply do better. Really simplistic kind of, I think, ways of thinking about it, but those are the right ways to think about how do we optimize that sort of knowledge workflow in a way that is the way that consistently results in a better experience for legal practitioners and the ability to deliver superior work product and value to clients, which is ultimately all that matters, kind of.
Mm.
Or I should say, if you don't get that right, the experiential
Nothing else
benefits for
matters.
the lawyers
It's true.
kind of, yeah, you'll have a short period of time to enjoy that.
It reminds me of the great the thing that gets mentioned to sort of comes up a lot of the things that we do is people asking not just what can this do, what can any technology deliver to the firm, but increasingly think how do I describe the client benefit of this kind of this technological change. And I went, Andrew, I was just wondering whether or not if are you in the business, did that come up for you? Did you not only think this is going to benefit the firm and compliance and everything else? It often seems really internal benefit. What kind of external benefit do you think you can kind of sort of show? Is there one for where you've got to, or did that come in the future?
Yeah, I think there are two examples. One's fairly transactional and maybe obvious, and that's in sharing. So sharing data documentation either in pure deal room or structured due diligence exercise for M&A transactions. So our clients would see something very different compared to, oh, here's a link to SharePoint, compared to here is your access to the NetDocs collaboration space for this named data room. So that's apparent to them. But I think the real thing for us, which is much more pervasive, is we want to be a relationship firm, i.e. we build on relations as well as the other things, but relations are really important, and that's human contact, human interaction. And in the SME space and growth space, you're dealing with people who aren't necessarily tutored in the law or the transactional mechanics of anything that they do, particularly from a startup, and particularly people who are selling companies for the first time and no real clue, which is totally forgivable. So what technology is doing and will do more and more is give us the space and time to deal with that human relationship. So the same amount of people spending more time helping clients understand what's going on while the technology takes care of stuff and takes time off their hands. I think that's a great bonus and benefit. We're not, as a firm, pushing to the robotic outcome of self-service law. I'm not saying we'd exclude that because it's appropriate in the right place. But when people have got real questions and they can't get answers, it's a problem. So there are platforms out there which serve the investment market, which answer all of the legal questions and problems and provide the documentation in an automated way. But most people end up confused about what's going on because they don't understand the game. So yeah, the main benefit for us is more time to talk to people.
That's great. Mike, have you got a take on that? Can you think of any other kind of, in a sense, benefits if a firm moves into this world that they might be able to sort of, I'd like to say extrude, not really the right word, but the client side would end up experiencing, or in a sense, because I'm already thinking about his business case here. But in a sense, in lots of smaller firms, I mean, I think it sounds like it was a good journey for the kind of firm that you're in, Andrew. It's a slightly kind of, in a sense, you're kind of presenting the argument to a group of peers. Does make some sense. In lots of firms, that's not really the case, right? And so I'm just wondering whether or not, if I was in a firm that wasn't quite as sort of big group, or as an operations manager for a smaller firm, and I've identified this, right? But in a sense, the firm might not be quite so, like, well, it's fine. Well, what are you saying? And yet they do. What kind of business case benefits could you present that are about? Because they'll buy what, if you can say the client will benefit in the following ways, it's much more likely to get that done, even though you're doing it for some really important compliance stuff. And sort of, so can you think of anything else to add to that, Mike?
Yeah, it's really an extension of Andrew's point. So it's where does that benefit to the client, whether that be, an individual who has kind of a small scale legal problem that probably has waited far too long before asking for legal help, because everyone does that, or whether it's large organizations that you're looking to kind of punch above your weight, as it were, as a small organization. Regardless, the experience that you can deliver in terms of responsiveness to the individual legal consumer. This is something I studied quite extensively several years ago. Individual legal consumers are horribly impatient in terms of the amount of grace they will grant a firm and how long it takes to get back to them, and exactly what that comes back with. And they're usually completely ignorant of the law, and therefore incapable of judging like which firm is more qualified to help with my particular legal problem. And that creates a perfect storm wherein the sort of responsiveness and the early sort of experience that you're able to provide to those potential future clients directly maps to either revenue for your firm or revenue for another firm, or the legal consumer giving up and simply not having their need addressed. So in that world, anything that you can do to drive efficiency, to free up that space in the working of matters, or in the sort of administrative layer, so that you can provide that responsiveness, can translate directly into improved revenue, improved client acquisition for smaller firms, and that's business growth. And across the board, regardless of the sort of area and even type of law that is practiced, firm reputation is the most valuable asset. And I would posit that in a world where the promise, and potentially in some cases overpromise, if you're talking about popular media, and confusion around things like artificial intelligence is so prevalent in just like public consciousness, being perceived as an innovator, being perceived as tech forward, being perceived as being on top of not just the technology, but the application of technology into the very strict security and compliance regime that's required, can provide great confidence, regardless of whether I'm a high net worth individual, or I'm looking for some help with conveyancing, or I'm a mid-sized business that's looking for effectively sort of an outside inside counsel relationship.
I think that's really interesting. I think we are sort of seconds away from the end of the webcast, and I just think that's what's been interesting there is that we've had this journey all the way through. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your journey from the sort of the realization through to implementation, but also the benefits that are flowing from that, both internally and externally. I think was a wonderful point you made there, Mike, about this responsiveness. It does match, you said, to what Andrew had said, that what this really relates to is that on the client side, be they consumers or their business sort of law firm business buyers, there is, in a digital world, the kind of the level of leeway they're going to give you, it gets less and less, right? The expectations get higher and higher. The speed they want everything from that it gets, they want it faster and faster. And the huge issue there, of course, is that the legal sector has always sort of suffered and benefited from this, which is this incredibly quantity of information asymmetry, capability asymmetry that exists between the law firms and the people who buy law firm services. is that because they don't understand it, they don't understand really what's going on with it, they're not really going to give you very much leeway on it, even if you say this takes ages. I don't know what I can't help this. So any kind of improvement of pace and productivity, especially at the smaller firm end, is going to really count. And I love this idea of this, you mentioned it, Andrew, the idea of this being able to present that much better client experience in terms of when they want to access their documents, or the documents that are about them in your system. This kind of client interfacing stuff is also incredibly important, because it's just what we expect in the 21st century from doing that one. So we've reached that hour point. I'm going to wrap it up. So it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, both of you, for being into. A massive thank you for Andrew for giving us that journey of the SME firm into DM land, and thank you, sort of, Mike, for giving us the benefit of your experience in terms of outlining all the other benefits and the journey that happens after that. We'll be releasing this recording afterwards and sending it out, so you can send it on and share it with all your friends and family, which of course you will be doing. But once again, thank you very much to both my co-hosts for today, and goodbye.